Well, what did you find? What did you find? In this note comparing situation, they came up pretty much with a kind of a consensus that, this being who appears in the Old Testament, yes, it was a powerful being, and it created, made, manufactured, crafted a good deal of this world, but it is not the ultimate deity. There is someone or something beyond it. And so what needs to be done with this deity is not just to say that it's false and it's evil or there's some kind of a demon, but it has to be placed in context, into a position of context to other powers and to other beings. And the way they did that was that they said, in the beginning of the beginnings, long before even anything physical came into existence, there was a fullness of consciousness, a plenum. And this fullness of transcendental consciousness, which is not for all intents and purposes personal, but impersonal is probably not a very good word. We don't like anything impersonal because it's sort of cold and nasty and unresponsive and things like that, But transpersonal, that was a good word invented, I think, if it was indeed invented in recent decades. But yet, let's say, having the capacity to manifest in a personal manner when that appears to be indicated. You see, here let's say these original old insights, these Gnostic insights, differ from, let's say, a lot of the contemporary kind of secularized spirituality. I mean, some years ago, some people came to us on a Sunday, a couple. I knew the lady from before, and the gentleman was actually a former Roman Catholic priest. So then we had lunch and all that. So he said, well, he says, the only kind of deity that I can accept now at this point in my life is a totally impersonal and totally transcendent deity. Well, I said, good for you, good for you. But there are problems with that too, don't you think? He says, what problem? I said, well, how are you going to pray? Are you going to pray, oh thou totally impersonal and totally transcendental something? It won't sound good. And moreover, it won't really work for you either. Is it not more likely that this beingness, when it chooses, can manifest as a person? Who are we to decree that God cannot be a person if he wants to be a person? Well, the man went away sort of scratching his head. I will not even draw the analogy to other people whom I have sent down the road scratching their head who came to me, but there were many, including one time that I was really proud of, when a salesman from Altadena Dairies, I believe, came to me, and he was selling, he tried to sell me fertile eggs for one thing, and something else that I don't remember anymore. But when I told him that I generally bought eggs in order to cook them and eat them, and not to sit on them and hatch them, his sales pitch was greatly impaired. And he soon left, and as I closed the door and I looked at him walking down the street, he was going shaking his head. Well, you have to have fun in life too. But in any event, similarly, I think that gentleman, the former Catholic priest, was shaking his head. So what these people came up with, and these were, I firmly believe, not only the original Gnostics, but they were the original Kabbalists as well, because it comes from the same source. And what they then said was that this process of world happening did not occur by way of a sudden creation out of nothing, as some of the theologians put it, but rather that this original being sort of emanated, poured itself forth, exuded itself, and entered the other regions until eventually the portions of itself which had gone the farthest away from the source became less and less like the source from whence they originated. It's not such an unreasonable idea, you know. It happens to every body of water that comes in, let's say, in a nice pristine form out of the mountains, out of the glaciers, or out of some wells or something like that, and then flows and flows through the countryside and picks up more and more pollution, and eventually ends up really a rather different thing from what it was when it started. So you see, something like this. Now, what are these last emanations which have become polluted, which have become polluted particularly in consciousness, to such an extent that they have become forgetful of who and what they are, of where they are coming from, and where they might be going? They're in total confusion and ignorance. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, folk, that they said those portions are you and you and you, and I'm sorry to admit even I. And not only us, but in another manner and other way, pretty much everything in this earthly creation. It is so far away from the source that its connection with the source now is very tenuous, although some elements are still there. And in between that ultimate source of the all, that ultimate consciousness, that fullness, which was often referred to then in Greek as the aletes theos, the true God, the true God, and the earthly manifestation here, in between that, there is a being who itself or himself has only a dim consciousness of what he is and where he may come from. He's not much smarter than we are, except more powerful in the sense that he's able to put together physical things and so forth. And they found a cognate term which was used by Plato, and Plato, everybody followed Plato. Plato was the one-man canon of philosophy and of truth, never referred to in other way for long time as the divine Plato. So Plato said that there is a what he called the demiurgos in Greek. That means a half-maker. I will not try to draw parallels to vernacular expressions that resemble that. But let's say, and it's called a half-maker because the substance, the underlying reality, the light that is hidden in the darkness, that part he did not make. That came from elsewhere when he came. But he made the forms. So half of the reality within which we live, which is the form reality, the material reality, the lesser reality, that he made. The other part he did not. Therefore he is called the half-maker or the demiurgos. So they came to identify the Old Testament deity with that demiurge. However, as let's say these heresies became more numerous and also more sophisticated, it came to be admitted quite often that, for instance, the Old Testament is only in part the message, the revelation of this demiurge. In fact, I think the Valentinian said that the Old Testament has three origins. One is the demiurge. The second is a little bit of material that filters through from the highest, from the true God, and you can find that in many of the Psalms. You can find them in the wisdom literature, such as the Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus, and others. And then some are teachings of the elders of Israel throughout the ages. But certainly the vengeful, the cruel, the oppressive, the unyielding statements in the Old Testament come from this imperfect, intermediate, lesser deity. Now, I know and you know that even though we might look at this sort of thing with a somewhat open mind,